Hey, thanks for joining me. I am currently in my car, stuck in traffic. I just went to a dentist appointment, so my mouth is still a little bit numb. So excuse me if I have problems pronouncing certain words and syllables. But I was riding and I was listening to a couple of videos, and it brought me into thinking about one of the debates on, running your own world and being a GM and sort of the line between, I guess, what a lot of people like to call railroading, which is, not giving the players a lot of choices and sort of having maybe the idea is that there's a pre-written story the GM has and they're trying to force the players through it. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think it's hard to prep a story or hard to prep any sort of D&D campaign without some amount of limitation in terms of possibility. Each campaign style, each module, everything, it's got particular ins and outs to it. It's got a kind of story there. And so when people say dungeon masters are not storytellers, I understand in general what people are trying to get at, but I think they're sort of missing the point, because everybody at the table is a storyteller. When we're playing Dungeons & Dragons, Mage the Ascension, Cyberpunk, anything, everybody at the table is a storyteller. We are all storytellers. The GM is the sort of, lead writer. They weave all the other ideas together. The random elements, the die rolls, character choices, player ideas and concepts, and we weave those all together. And if that's not storytelling, then I don't know what is. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what storytelling is. I think the real problem is when people are when they really need to be writing a novel, and they need to do that as well as play D&D and run games, and that way it won't get mixed up. People have a really big story, they have a great concept they really love, and they want to really focus on it. And so it's a lot easier to get 5 of your friends involved with your story than it is to sit for 3 years, write, edit, get an editor, go through the process of refining your book, and then getting it to market and working on getting it sold to a decent number of people. That's challenging. And you have to face a lot of things about life and probably about yourself to get there. You have to try really hard. It is a little bit easier to use Dungeons & Dragons as the medium to tell your story. But I think that's still a valid way to play Dungeons & Dragons. There's still plenty of people that like that. As a GM, I tend toward epic, world-saving sort of scenarios. And these things sort of come baked in with certain plot and story elements that are floating out there. And the players that join those games, they want to engage with those elements. If you've got in your game description, your pitch to the game, this is a hardcore game and it's military, and there's going to be a lot of exploration, and there's secrets to the past that are going to be unveiled, and your characters are going to be key members, key people in the unfolding world events, right? Well, that's not railroading. You've invited your players in. You've created a really awesome setting. It's railroading if you don't let them make their choices to get there. The way I prep games to get around this is I generally have some really set ideas that I want to explore, that I want to create scenarios where all of the people at the table are exploring these concepts, engaging them honestly, and when I'm successfully able to do that, I do find those moments and story beats pop up naturally, because I've set the sort of stage, I've set all the infrastructure for it, the players are interested, and they have sort of built their characters and made their decisions to unearth this particular aspect of the world that I've set out. Now that's a story. That's a story I set up from the beginning. I wrote it out and I said, this is what we're going to do. This is what I want to do. Do you want to join me? And I had plenty of players. Yes, I'm in. This sounds great. And what I find is that because of that, and perhaps it is the way I pitch my game and the way I make certain things clear in the game description if you're reading it online. It gives players the ideas of this is the kind of action we're going to engage in. So if your players want that, and you are offering that, then they'll take it. I think another problem comes when you're telling everybody, oh, we're just going to play this D&D game. We got this cool open story. You can make whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. And then you engage play, get through your session 0, and the game turns out to be not what the players expected. They don't have enough choice. There's not enough agency. They don't get to engage with the story elements or the concepts that you've put in the game in the way that they want to. And all of this can be covered at session 0, really. And the way you write up your game notes, how you make your pitch and all that stuff. Because a lot of players really want a good story. And they want a good GM to help create that good story. So the misunderstanding is that, yes, we are not lone storytellers. We're not novelists. We're not the sole creators of the story and what's happening. What a GM is we're supposed to weave all the threads together. Ours, the other players, random dice elements like I mentioned, and create a consistent sort of narrative out of that based on what I, the GM, want and like, but also all my players, because there's no game without the players. And when you give a player something that they want in a way that they don't expect, that is one of the best experiences I've had as a GM and as a player. Where it's like, here's my backstory, work this in somehow, and the GM surprises me with it. That's great. But that only happens because the player is flexible, the GM is flexible, but there's still a theme that both the GM and the player can work off of together to sort of co-create this narrative going wherever they want it to end up, right? So yeah, I think it's confusing and tricky when people say, oh, DMs aren't storytellers, or if you're making a story-based campaign, you're going to be railroading and you're going to destroy player agency. It's like, that's not true. It's not true if you set it up right. The players decide they want to engage in this type of story. Then every choice they make is theirs. But if you make the bait and switch, or you don't tell your players beforehand, this is the theme we're working on, here's the challenges we're going to have, here's the difficulty that most of the people are going to have in this world. So I want you to make characters who are going to deal with these difficulties, and then let them go however they want. And then you look at their characters, their backstories, what the players want, the story you've set up, and you look for places where all those things can overlap. And a cool personal player moment overlaps with a cool character moment, or maybe multiple character moments, and a story, a big story beat for the overall campaign. Those are the really magic to me, and I really, really think that, yeah, the best way to get there is to run the kind of campaign that you want to run. Write it up the way you want to write it. Be really clear about how it's going, how you want it to go. But then be ready to be surprised and to let the players explore those concepts however they want. Don't expect one particular moment to happen unless it's a fight they want to have, and then plan that fight out. There's a certain social encounter they're really interested in. Once you know they're interested in it, then sit down and plan it out. But if you plan it out before, you're going to fall in love with it, and there's a pretty good chance you're going to try to shoehorn it in later where it may or may not fit. So that's my sort of brief thoughts on world building, home brewing, railroading, and player agency, and storytelling at the table. Hope you enjoyed this. If you do, please give a like to the video. If you like my content, of course, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notifications. I usually have some other information in the doodly-doo, they say, the description, and then I usually put another comment on the video afterwards, sort of prompting with some questions and things like that. So thanks a lot for joining me and listening to my little ramble while I drive and get stuck in traffic. Thanks so much. Y'all have a great day and play your story.